Nonz, Valentine's Day special. Facts and explanations to why it was such fantastic non-special. Just some quick answers, just to let people know that there was a lot of references that I hid through layers and layers and layers and layers of writing, but I was really just trying to compete with My Hero Academia, Heroes Rising, and the reason why is because that movie lacked a whole lot of dialogue, but it had some great action, but the pacing was somewhat horrible. But it all panned out due to anime being behind in evolution and why we kept dick riding Dragon Ball Z, even though Dragon Ball Z is the greatest anime of all time. But the problem was the reason why it had so much choreography was when I watched the movie, I was like, dude, that's how literally the fight scenes for Nonz I write look like. So that is the reason why I had to set it straight. I'm like, I know I can make better fight scenes than Nonz. Like, I've made better fight scenes before, so. And this movie like dialogue, especially with Mineta Grape Juice, especially with all these characters, all the fucking Bakugo puns that could have been going on in that movie, and that movie still lacked dialogue. I did not like Heroes Rising, at least, you know, the script for it, because I watched that movie 4 times when I was in theaters, and the one thing I hated the most was the fact that it had, you know, beautiful visuals, but bad, very, very, very bad pacing and storytelling. But it did keep you captured and motivated, only due to that was supposed to be there, because we're supposed to be at that level for our time in Western media. So what I did was I added Heroes Rising with a whole bunch of dialogue, with a whole bunch of non-stop funny jokes, and way more better action. So the reason why is because of the fact that I knew I could do it, because I knew that that was a reference to how I draw fight scenes in my manga. My choreography looks exactly like that. The truth of the matter is that movie had heavy spoilers, so I decided to get some heavy spoilers. Like, you know, transformations that shouldn't have been there. They were all not supposed to be that strong for the movie. Guinevere was very OP, but she was not supposed to be fighting alongside Ranye. Ranye wasn't supposed to be introduced into later arcs. And, you know, there was a whole lot of spoilers of what his ability can do. Like, I wasn't supposed to show Ranye fight yet. I wasn't supposed to have Gabaya fight a villain at that level yet. But the great thing about that is it showed a whole lot of great dialogue and great potential for the characters. Via, though, was also trying to not be introduced, but there was a great thing about why I did that. Some characters who I will not be staying in the video will be canon characters of Nonz who I just put in the movie just to compete. So, what about this was referencing Heroes Rising? So, basically, the epicness from beginning to end, the character development, the spoilers of a whole lot of shit, like Krieg, that girl that looks like Krieg from Codename Kids Next Door. Krieg is Kick's sister. Now, that was a very, very heavy spoiler. A reference from somebody that went to a specific school that I specifically had trouble with is definitely a reference in that movie. Some of Tito's abilities, like how hacks he is, was definitely a spoiler. And the mood world was an all-time heavy spoiler because of how heavy the villain was. So let's get into some references and why it was so impactful. So Jume and Tito, where did I get this from? So Jume is actually a parody of Yumi from Code Lyoko. So that's why her robots that she sends out expand, but first they become miniature, but then they expand into really big robots that you see in Lyoko. And she's also a master of Black Lotus Kung Fu. And that was a really heavy mask because she has red eyes, black hair with red tips, and she was wearing a Scottish red dress for the entire time, if you guys didn't know that. If you know a lot about Code Lyoko and why Yumi is such a tomboy, is because he's referenced by a musical group called the Gorillas. She's wearing all black, literally long sleeves, with her body covered up. She is definitely a reference to a gorilla gang. And that is why when I started gorilling at family, what happened was this. She's a reference to when I started living alone a little bit. I was living alone inside. I started watching reruns of Code Lyoko. So what I noticed about Yumi, about how deep her character is, there was a time where I had to stop gorilling, where I had to live on the streets, when I had to like exit from civilization because I was apparently getting pussy the wrong way. And so Yumi was the perfect example of why I had to stop grilling. So when I started watching Kolioka, I started realizing what Yumi is references. That tomboy act is a part of the gorilla rape culture, and the reason why they're in boarding school and the reason why they are heavily protected. Her rebellious nature with William is what inspired me to create the character Jume, which will be canon in Nonz. This will be a part of a 5-member team that's gonna be a part of the main member teams, just like the Konoha 11. So yes, Yumi is confirmed for the Konoha 11 and Nonz. I used to have a Yumi obsession because when I was all alone, I always thought about how hard she had in the show, how she's literally a master of martial arts, super funny, great personality, a very dominant personality, very multidimensional, and somewhat intelligent. The typical girl you see in school that is very popular, that everybody wants to go to. She literally reminds me of every single person that went to Arturo's juvie school. That's how literally every single member of that juvie school will be envious of her. Look at her. She's a jack of all trades. Look at her looking thuggish as fuck, hanging around with fucking William, who looks like he has dreads. So the funny thing is, I had a red and black outfit that I wore to Level Up Expo. So when I went there, I always practiced for the dance. So Jume was literally my Yumi obsession all the way up to when I went to Level Up Expo. And then I literally killed shit on the dance floor. So that's why Tito ended up with Jume at the end of the movie. That all black is a reference to a Crip gang that I used to hang out with, that literally where we used to do tricks for our shirts. Those long sleeves are for tutting and for fighting, which is why she was the perfect fit for Tito. So why did Jume end up with Tito at the end of the movie? After he grabbed her ass, after he saved her from an accident and all this and that. Now this is why I had to make sure that they ended up, because I want to get this through you guys. Just because you saved the girl's life does not give you permission to grab her ass. And the real reason why he ended up with her was because Nonz is a shonen. It's not seinen, it's shonen. I want you guys to understand that. And I did that just to keep the fantasy up, but in real life that wouldn't happen. Just because you saved a girl's life after you pushing forward, after you harassing her all that time during the dance, and then all of a sudden, no, that's a fairy tale. That's not real life, man. I'm trying to let you guys know. That specific ending was sugar-coated specifically for people to understand that that is what media is, and that's the difference between a TV show and real life. Why did Tito end up with the girlfriend and tons of numbers at the end of the movie? Was because in real life, hip-hop is dominant. So yes, Motor Hero was right. Tito got the majority of the numbers, and that was referencing the older generation. The older generation, when they used to play this game of who gets the most numbers, but the person who got the relationship out of the one number that mattered the most, that's what that game is based off of. So yes, that was a really big moment, and that moment at the dance when Gabaya spins on his head is a reference to when I was younger, when I used to spin in my head. So yes, that is an Easter egg. Chaz Lyoko is based off Chaz and Delorobia from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX and Code Lyoko. Ryu Heat is a reference to my 7th grade manga. He used to be there when nobody else was in. Vito was also the original rough draft of Gabaya when it was just Gabaya. He was also literally referenced there before I knew, how to properly, write better characters. But Ryu Heat was there for a while. He was the original idea I had, and Ryu Heat is based off Zoro and my Zoro obsession, and literally, that's who his character's design is based off of. He wasn't in the rough draft of Nonz that I made in high school, but he was there in 7th grade. So yeah, that Vito and Ryu Heat were characters that I created when I was in 7th grade. So even though Tito ended up with Jume at the end of the movie, even though he wound up for a white boy, Beta gets a new love interest for the upcoming one, the Curse of the Elephant Statue. So that is literally heavy, and the final fight between Zaf, Ranya, and Gabaya is based off of Bakugo and Deku versus 9 at the end of the movie. So I made it even more interesting and left it up to the team captains to face up against the biggest threat that they have known thus far. Motohiro ended up with Kafani was an honest mistake. I did not mean to draw his hand over her hand. That was pretty funny. But that was a mistake. But that was canon in the series. But that was a spoiler that wasn't meant. I didn't know what the fuck happened, literally. I drew one hand and all of a sudden it was in the right position. So they hold hands by accident. I did not mean to draw that. But that was pretty funny. But yeah, Motohiro and Kafani is a love interest in Nonz. And that's wasn't supposed to be spoiled, but I put that in anyway, so yeah. Anti-Zero and the gang with Giovanni was also a gang that was heavily spoiled. that is a part of the junior division of Nonz, and they're a part of Bayaki, but there are the teenagers obviously, and Gabaya is literally just a runner up, and he is basically in junior high, and they are juniors, and so Anti-Zero, if you don't know who Keku is a junior in Nonz who used to be Jit's rival. Keiko is the older brother of somebody who I'm saving for in the upcoming vampire special. So Keiko is based off Zabuza and Kamina. So Keiko is a junior, so he's the same age as Anti-Zero. So yeah, that is a reference. And the reference between Anti-Zero is Anti-Zero used to go out with Jume, and the reason why is because he likes girls that are younger, because he was put in a predicament just like me. When he says that they're not mature when they're at my age, that is serious, because I went through a whole generation of kids who are literally dumb as fuck, that didn't care about people who surpassed the limits, who didn't care about your personal hobbies. You had to do something basic or else I don't like you, because there's no benefit for you being unique if you don't fit in between a specific slot that you know you're going to benefit from. You can't be unique and not fit the stereotype. I'm sorry, that's not a guarantee, which is pushy shit, which is the reason why the majority of people in my generation turned out stupid, which is the reason why they ended up with people who always were the bad guys, who had nothing in their name, who literally, if they did have something in their name, it really went through tons of criminal activity, and really fucking sucked, man. I went through a whole with the most immature girls. It doesn't matter if you're dumb as fuck. As long as you're popular, I'm going to choose you over the other guy who's obviously smarter but doesn't have a bigger following, which is literally the most immature shit that I have ever fucking heard. Zero got with Jume because he wasn't imprinted by the world, and he wasn't obsessed with sex propaganda, and he's been through a lot as a child. So literally, the reason why Zero and Jume made a good couple back in the day was specifically because all the girls that were Anti-Zero's age were not on his level of thinking. Jume, since he's been through a lot, is more mature, and that's why Anti-Zero used to go out with Jume. So when Tito tried to pull that thug shit, where he tried to pull like, oh, I know you don't be that, Jume already been in and out of that shit before in Anti-Zero, so she didn't fall for that shit. And that's why she wouldn't fall for it in the end, because he's so strong, because he's so stable, because he literally knows right from wrong. She used to hang out with people just like that in those gangs, so she knows how they operate. So none of that shit would have worked in real life, because she's literally trained herself, and she's already trained to not fuck with people that use gang member mentalities to get women. Giovanni and Dita were both references to Shoto Todoroki, but they're split. One's based off the potential that my brother had if he literally chose one side and then try to flip-flop. And my brother's biggest problem was he tried to be Huey when he was already Riley. And he pretends to be Huey when everybody knows that he is Riley. He literally says emotional speeches but does arrogant shit. And literally, his excuse is, oh, well, I don't get caught. And that's what happens when you deal with God. That's what happens when you deal with karma. That's what happens when you deal with people. Trying to be book smart and street smart isn't going to work. And he convinced me that you could do both. Now me, I'm more book smart than street smart. I ended up on the streets because I went through a whole lot of shit and I made up my mind. I'd rather be book smart because book smart comes with more opportunity. Giovanni is based off several references about I became somewhat of a Batman Beyond figure. Here's a reference to what I went through last year, how I needed to learn how to be street smart in order to defend myself. And he's based off the Batman Beyond that I became, but he's also based off why I stopped grilling, why I stopped doing dumb shit, because of the fact that when I learned that puts you at a disadvantage and that would take away your freedom is the reason why I stopped doing that. And that reference to Ray Netta, when he literally just saved her fucking life, literally got out of a serious situation, and he still wanted to play games, he had every right to tell her, right, I just saved your life. Shut up before I leave. You have to understand that people don't understand situations nowadays. They just look at what's cool and what's not. That eye with Tito is a reference to a transformation he has in the series. So there's going to be a third movie that I will be working on. And that movie is going to have its own little side video pretty soon. But for right now, those are the references in the Nonz Valentine special. I want you to go check out the entire full manga movie. All 3 pieces will be down below in the description, so please check that out.